AITA for freezing my wife's card after learning who her spa weekend was really for? I'm Christopher, 43, and after 14 years of marriage to Melissa, I'd gotten used to being the steady one. I worked steady hours, paid attention to mortgage reminders, remembered which cabinet hinge needed fixing, and still made coffee for two every Sunday morning, even when the silence at the kitchen table felt heavier than any argument. That was the part of our marriage most people saw from the outside. Me calm, Melissa expressive. Me practical, Melissa alive in every room. For a long time, I loved that about us. She made ordinary nights feel like something was happening. She could turn a grocery store run into a private joke. She could make a boring dinner with friends feel like we had wandered into the best table in the restaurant. I didn't marry someone I hated. That would have made everything simpler. The Melissa I married was warm and funny and a little chaotic in a way that used to make me smile. She would grab my hand in the kitchen and dance with me while pasta boiled over. She used to tease me for labeling the breaker box and then brag about it when the lights went out, and I knew exactly what to do. When I got too serious, she could pull me out of my own head with one look. Somewhere along the way, the teasing changed shape. At first, it was small enough that I told myself not to be sensitive. At a barbecue, when someone joked that I seemed like the kind of guy who always got oil changes on time, Melissa laughed and said, "That's Christopher." Excitement with a calendar reminder. Everyone laughed, so I laughed too. Another time, when I asked if she wanted to watch a movie like we used to, she barely looked up from her phone and said, "You mean sit in the dark and pretend we still have chemistry?" I remember standing there with the remote in my hand, feeling stupid for suggesting it. She started calling me safe like it was an insult. Safe became boring. Boring became predictable. Predictable became controlling, though I still don't know how remembering to pay the insurance bill turned into an act of oppression. One night, after she canceled a dinner reservation I had made because she said she was too tired, she went out 2 hours later with people from a group chat I wasn't in. When she came home smelling of fried food and somebody else's cologne, I asked if everything was okay between us. She dropped her purse on the counter and sighed like I had asked her to solve a math problem. "You're safe, Christopher," she said. Sometimes safe feels like being asleep. I wanted to say something sharp. I wanted to ask if she preferred being awake with people who didn't have to live with the consequences of her moods. Instead, I said, "Then tell me what would help." That became my position for almost 2 years. Tell me what would help. I suggested counseling. She said I wanted a stranger to gang up on her. I planned date nights. She said planned romance wasn't romance. I stopped planning and tried to give her space. She said I had checked out. I asked direct questions. She said she felt interrogated. I stopped asking so many questions. She said I didn't care enough to fight. There was no door that didn't lead back to me being wrong. We did make it to counseling twice. The first session was uncomfortable, but not useless. The counselor asked both of us what we wanted to repair. I said trust, kindness, the feeling that we're on the same team. Melissa crossed her arms and said, "I want to know if I'm allowed to be myself." The counselor asked what that meant. Melissa said she didn't know, then cried, then spent the drive home angry at me for being too calm while she was vulnerable. The second session was worse. When the counselor asked about contempt, Melissa got quiet. I admitted that the jokes hurt, especially in front of other people. Melissa stared out the window and said, "So now I'm not allowed to have a sense of humor." After that, she canceled 3 appointments in a row. Each cancellation came to our shared family email account, the one we used for household bills, reservations, warranties, and anything neither of us wanted to lose. I saved the emails because I save things. At the time, I thought it was just a habit. Then Evan started showing up in her sentences. Not physically at first, just as a name. Evan said this. Evan thinks that. Evan recommended a book. Evan heard this podcast. Evan says people who feel trapped should stop apologizing for wanting more. The first time I asked who Evan was, Melissa said, "A friend." The second time, she said, "Someone who actually listens." The third time, she laughed and said, "You would like him if you weren't insecure." I hadn't accused her of anything. I had only asked why she was smiling at her phone at 12:30 at night after barely speaking to me all evening. "He's funny," she said, turning the screen face down. "So was I once," I said. She looked at me with pity. I would have preferred anger. The phone behavior changed after that. Melissa had always cared about privacy, but this was different. Her phone was suddenly always face down, always on silent, always in her pocket when she walked from one room to another. She changed her passcode, which wouldn't have bothered me as much if she hadn't still picked up my phone whenever it buzzed near her. One Sunday morning, while I was making coffee, my phone lit up with a text from Daniel, my closest friend. Melissa glanced at it from across the counter. "Daniel again?" she asked. "It's about the game later," I said. She reached for the phone like it was normal. I moved it away without thinking. Her eyes narrowed. "Why are you being weird?" I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because the rules had gotten so twisted that I could barely follow them. Privacy was sacred when it belonged to her. Suspicion was fair when it belonged to me. A month before the dinner where everything blew up, Melissa told me she needed a weekend away. We were in the kitchen. She was standing by the sink, scrolling on her phone while I loaded plates into the dishwasher. She didn't look nervous. If anything, she looked prepared. "I'm going away next month," she said. I waited for more. "With some girls," she added. "Which girls?" She gave a small laugh. "People who don't make me explain why I'm breathing." I shut the dishwasher carefully. I asked who you were traveling with, Melissa. "That's not a trap. It's just a weekend. I need space to feel like myself again." I looked at her phone. Not at the screen, just at the way her fingers tightened around it. "Where are you staying?" I asked. "Why does that matter?" "Because you're my wife and you're going out of town." "And there it is," she said. "There what is?" "The control." I remember taking a breath and reminding myself not to become the version of me she kept describing to other people. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't block the door. I didn't demand her phone. I just said, "Put the basic details on the shared calendar. Dates, hotel, emergency contact. I do the same for you." She rolled her eyes, but later that night, a calendar entry appeared. Girls' weekend. No hotel. No names. Just Friday through Sunday with a little suitcase emoji. I stared at it on my laptop for longer than I should have. That was the beginning of the end, though I didn't know it yet. 2 weeks later, the hotel confirmation landed in the shared email. It was a Tuesday morning. I was paying bills before work, the way I usually did around the same time each month. The inbox had the usual clutter: insurance reminder, grocery coupons, a receipt from the hardware store, and then one subject line that made my stomach go still. "Your upcoming stay is confirmed." I clicked it because we both used that email for travel. I thought maybe Melissa had finally put the hotel somewhere I could see it. The reservation was for the same weekend as Girls' Weekend. 2 nights. King room. Deposit charged to the shared credit card. The cancellation policy was listed right under the dates. Guest names, Melissa and Evan. I read it 3 times because my brain kept trying to be kinder than the facts. There are moments when anger arrives hot. This wasn't one of them. This was cold. It was like stepping into a room and realizing all the furniture had been moved while you slept. My first instinct was to call her immediately. My thumb hovered over her name. I could already hear the conversation. Her saying I was invading her privacy. Me saying the confirmation came to our shared email. Her saying I was proving her point. Me getting louder. Her saving that louder version of me for later. So I put the phone down. That one decision probably saved me. I opened the credit card account. The hotel deposit was there. So was a rideshare charge near a restaurant Melissa had mentioned wanting to try. Then an airline seat selection fee, small enough that I might have missed it if I hadn't been looking. There was also a restaurant reservation hold for Saturday night. I checked the joint checking account. Nothing huge, but enough little transfers and charges to show she was using our shared money as if the lie itself were a household expense. Then I checked the calendar again. Girls' weekend. No details. I went back through old texts, not on her private phone, just the ones between us. I found the night she had told me, "I need a break from feeling managed." I found where I had asked, "Who are you going with?" And she had replied, "Friends." Please don't make this ugly. The lie was not hidden well. It was hidden behind my habit of trusting her. That evening, I waited until after dinner. Melissa had ordered takeout without asking if I wanted anything, then left the container on the counter with 2 bites of noodles still in it. She was standing at the sink, texting, when I put one printed page beside her. The hotel confirmation. She looked at it, then at me. Her face changed for half a second before she pulled it back into annoyance. "Why are you printing my emails?" she asked. It came to the family email. "So you're monitoring me now?" "No," I said. "I'm asking why a hotel reservation for your girls' weekend lists Evan as the second guest." Her jaw tightened. It's not what you think. Then explain it. She picked up the paper and dropped it again like it was dirty. I needed space. With Evan. I needed to be around someone who doesn't make me feel guilty for existing. I nodded slowly. Are your friends going? That's not the point. It is the point. She looked away. Does Evan have his own room? I asked. She gave a humorless laugh. You hear yourself, right? Yes. I hear myself asking a simple question. You're acting like I'm property. I'm acting like my wife lied about a weekend with another man and charged part of it to our card. She leaned back against the counter, folding her arms. I lied because I knew you'd make it ugly. That sentence did something to me. It told me she hadn't stumbled into a lie because she panicked. She had built the lie, then built my reaction into her excuse for it. So the lie was planned, I said. She blinked. I let the silence sit. Finally, she said, if you really loved me, you'd let me figure out what I want. You can figure it out, I said, but not with our joint account. Her expression hardened. Don't you dare threaten me financially. I'm not threatening you. I'm telling you I won't pay for a trip you lied about. She grabbed her phone off the counter. This is exactly what I mean. Control. She walked out of the kitchen before I could answer. I stood there next to the dishwasher with a printed hotel confirmation on the counter and realized something ugly. She had already decided what the story was. If I got angry, I was controlling. If I stayed calm, I was cold. If I asked questions, I was interrogating her. If I stopped asking, I didn't care. I was trapped in a trial where she had written both the charges and the verdict. I didn't sleep much that night. Around midnight, I went out to my car and called Daniel. He answered on the third ring, groggy. Somebody better be dead. My marriage might be. He got quiet fast. What happened? I told him everything. The girls' weekend. The hotel email. Evan. The charges. The conversation in the kitchen. When I finished, I expected him to say something like, I'm sorry, man. He did say that, but only after a long silence. Then he said, do not give her the meltdown she already told people you'd have. That hit me harder than I expected. I gripped the steering wheel. You think she's told people? I think if she's calling you controlling to your face, she's probably workshopping that story somewhere else. I looked back at the house. The kitchen light was still on. What am I supposed to do? Pretend I don't know? No. Get proof. Protect your money. Talk to a lawyer. And don't do anything stupid out of pain. I'm not trying to destroy her. Good, Daniel said. Then don't. But stop helping her destroy you. The next morning, the first text came from Karen, Melissa's older sister. Christopher, I love you both, but Melissa feels trapped. Marriage requires effort from both people. I stared at the screen while coffee dripped into the pot. I typed, what did she tell you? Karen replied almost immediately. That she needs one weekend to breathe, and you're making it about jealousy and money. There it was. I wrote back, ask her what the weekend actually is before you decide what I did wrong. Karen didn't respond for an hour. When she did, it was worse. If this is about control, you need to own that. I didn't answer. By lunchtime, 2 mutual friends had sent me careful little messages. One said, 14 years is a lot to throw away over one weekend. Another said, maybe she wouldn't need space if she felt seen. I felt like I was watching people walk into a movie halfway through and start yelling at the wrong character. That evening, I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop and a legal pad. I wasn't looking for drama. I was looking for facts. The shared family email had more than I expected. Counseling confirmations. Cancellation notices. The original dinner reservation I had made that Melissa canceled, followed by a rideshare receipt from the same night. Hotel confirmation. Card charge notices. A restaurant booking for 2 under Melissa's name. Then I found the screenshots. They were in a shared folder on the laptop, mixed in with downloads and old documents. Melissa had a habit of sending herself screenshots from her phone when she wanted to save something or print it later. I had never cared about that folder before. I wish I still didn't. At first, they were just conversations with friends where she complained about me. Christopher is so predictable it makes me want to scream. He's not a bad husband. That's the problem. He's just safe. I feel like I'm living with a responsible roommate who knows my coffee order. Those hurt, but they weren't surprising. Then I found the messages with Evan. I didn't read every word. I didn't need to. A few lines were enough. Evan, are you sure he won't freak out? Melissa, he'll be mad, but he always calms down and pays the bills. Evan, and if he says no? Melissa, Then he proves he's controlling. A little farther down. Melissa, honestly, it's a test. If he fights for me, maybe there's still something. If he just lets me go, then I know he never cared. Evan, that feels like a no-win thing for him. Melissa, he's too stable to leave anyway. I sat there for a long time. That was the moment the pain changed shape. It stopped being confusion and became information. She wasn't just making a selfish choice. She was using my best traits against me. My patience, my responsibility, my refusal to humiliate her, my habit of calming down before I spoke. She had mistaken all of it for weakness. Worse, she had counted on it. The next day, I made an appointment for a divorce consultation. I didn't walk in saying my wife had done every terrible thing imaginable. I was careful. I said I had discovered a hotel reservation with another man, charges on shared accounts, and messages suggesting she expected me to keep funding things no matter what. I asked what I could legally do to protect myself without cutting off necessary household obligations. The attorney was calm in the way people are calm when they have seen worse. He told me to document everything, keep communication factual, avoid threats, and not empty joint accounts. He explained the difference between shared bills and personal spending. He told me not to make any dramatic moves that would look reckless later. So I didn't. I moved my paycheck deposit into an individual account. I left enough in the joint account for the mortgage, utilities, groceries, insurance, and regular household expenses. I did not touch Melissa's personal account. I did not cancel anything that kept the house running. But the card she planned to use for the hotel and the weekend extras was tied to an account where I was the primary holder and she had an authorized user card. That, I was told, I could limit. So I did. I lowered the available spending on the shared card and canceled the authorized user card connected to my individual credit line. I saved confirmation numbers. I printed the statements. I made a folder with tabs: hotel, bank, texts, counseling, timeline. It felt ridiculous at first, like something from a courtroom show. But as I slid each page into place, I felt my breathing change. I wasn't preparing to attack her. I was preparing to stop being cornered. Then I sent Melissa one email. Melissa, I know the weekend you labeled as a girls' weekend is a hotel stay involving Evan. I know joint funds and a shared card were used for deposits and related charges. I am not preventing you from going anywhere. I am stating that I will not fund a trip you lied about. Going forward, financial and marital discussions need to be documented in writing. Household obligations will continue to be covered. Personal choices connected to Evan will not be paid for by me. Christopher. She didn't respond for 43 minutes. Then my phone started buzzing. You are unbelievable. So this is who you really are. You're punishing me financially because I want one weekend to breathe? I replied once. No, I'm declining to sponsor the lie. She called immediately. I let it ring. She called again. I let it ring again. Then she texted. Pick up. We are not doing this by email. I wrote. We are for now. That made her furious. When I got home, she was in the living room, standing near the window with her arms crossed. Her overnight bag was open on the couch. Clothes were folded inside with the kind of care she used when she wanted to look unbothered. The card declined, she said before I had even set my keys down. I hung them on the hook. I know. You embarrassed me. At the hotel? Her mouth tightened. So you tried to finish paying for it, I said. I was confirming the reservation. With the card you used after I told you I wouldn't fund it. You're my husband. That didn't seem to matter when you put Evan's name on the room. She looked away first. You don't get to do this, she said. I already did. She laughed, but there was panic under it now. Do you think money makes you powerful? No, I said. I think money makes things real. And this is real now. Her phone buzzed. She looked down, and for the first time in weeks, she didn't angle the screen away fast enough. Evan. I didn't read it, but she did. Her face changed. Later, I found out why. Not from hacking, not from chasing him, not from anything dramatic. Melissa threw the information at me during an argument like it was somehow my fault. He's uncomfortable now, she snapped. Who? Evan. I almost smiled, but not quite. Because the hotel isn't free? Because you're dragging him into our marriage. I didn't put his name on the reservation. She paced the living room, phone in hand. He says maybe we should postpone. Convenient. He doesn't want drama. Then he picked an odd hobby. She glared at me. He cares about me. Enough to pay for the weekend? She didn't answer. That silence told me a lot. Evan had been charming when the weekend was an escape funded by somebody else's stability. He was emotionally available when emotional availability cost him nothing. But once payment, accountability, and the word divorce drifted into the room, he suddenly needed space too. A couple of days before the planned trip, Melissa changed tactics. The family group chat lit up while I was eating a sandwich over the kitchen sink. It was one of those big group chats that should never exist, but somehow does. Family from both sides, a few mutual friends who were close enough to be included in holiday plans, and people who liked to react with thumbs-up emojis to things that did not need reactions. Karen wrote first. I think everyone needs to be careful before this gets uglier. Melissa is hurting. Then Melissa sent a long message. I've tried to be respectful, but Christopher has cut off access to money because I asked for one weekend to breathe. I feel controlled and punished. I don't want people taking sides, but I can't keep pretending this is normal. I stared at, I don't want people taking sides in a message she had sent to people specifically to make them take sides. A mutual friend named Paul replied, marriage means fighting for your wife, man. Someone else wrote, financial punishment is not okay. Another person, 14 years doesn't get thrown away over one weekend. My phone kept lighting up. I watched the notifications stack on top of each other. A year earlier, I might have tried to defend myself line by line, exhausting myself in the hope that if I used the perfect words, everyone would understand. Instead, I placed the phone face down and finished my sandwich. Melissa watched me from across the kitchen. She looked almost disappointed. Aren't you going to say anything? She asked. Not yet. That's your problem, Christopher. You shut down and act superior. No, I said. I'm waiting until everybody is done performing concern. Her eyes flashed. You think this is a performance? I think you invited an audience before you told the truth. She looked at me for a long second, then said, Karen wants everyone to have dinner Saturday. The weekend you were supposed to be away? Her lips pressed together. Plans changed. Evan postponed. She didn't answer. The dinner was framed as a chance to clear the air. I knew exactly what that meant. Melissa wanted a room full of people to pressure me into apologizing and unlocking the card, or at least admitting I had been cruel. She wanted witnesses. So I brought receipts. Saturday evening, I arrived with a folder in my hand and a strange calm in my chest. The dinner was at Karen's place. There were casserole dishes on the counter, paper plates stacked near a bowl of salad, half-finished drinks sweating on coasters, and a heavy awkwardness over everything. People spoke too brightly when I walked in. Melissa was already there, wearing the soft gray sweater she wore when she wanted to look wounded but reasonable. Her eyes were a little red, though I couldn't tell whether she had been crying or preparing to cry. Karen hugged me stiffly. Thanks for coming, she said. I said I would. Her eyes dropped to the folder. What's that? Context. She didn't like that answer. Dinner itself was barely dinner. People moved food around on their plates. Someone asked about the weather. Paul made a joke that died before it reached the other side of the table. Phones kept buzzing because the group chat was still active, which felt absurd considering most of the people in it were sitting 10 feet from each other. Finally, Melissa set down her fork. I can't keep doing this, she said. Every head turned toward her. It had the feeling of a cue. She looked at me, then at everyone else. I asked for one weekend. One weekend to breathe and think and feel like a person again. And Christopher cut off the card. He moved money. He's forcing me to communicate by email like I'm some kind of employee. This is what I've been trying to explain. I don't feel like a wife. I feel managed. Karen looked at me with a mix of sadness and warning. Christopher, she said, if this is about control, you need to own that. Paul leaned back in his chair. Man, I'm not trying to pile on, but marriage means fighting for your wife. Another friend said, maybe she wouldn't need space if she felt seen. Melissa wiped under one eye. No tear had fallen yet. I waited. She kept going. He doesn't yell, so people think he's kind. But cold can be worse than yelling. He makes decisions and calls it responsibility. He punishes me and calls it boundaries. I just wanted a weekend to decide what I felt, and he made me feel like a criminal. My pulse was steady. That surprised me. Maybe because I had already heard all of this in smaller pieces. Maybe because the folder beside my plate was heavier than her performance. When she finally stopped, I said, Are you finished? Her face tightened. That's all you have to say? Finish your story first. I just did. No, I said. You left out the middle. The room went quiet. I took out my phone and opened the family group chat. My hands didn't shake. I attached the files in order: hotel confirmation, bank charges, calendar screenshot, counseling cancellations, selected messages, and a simple timeline. Then I hit send. Phones started lighting up around the table. At the same time, I slid the printed folder across the table toward Karen. "You all heard her version," I said. "Now you can see what she left out." Melissa stared at the phones, then at me. "What did you do?" I corrected the record. "You're humiliating me." I looked at her carefully. "You made me the villain in public." "I'm correcting the record in public." Karen opened the folder first. Her face changed as she moved through the pages. The hotel confirmation was on top. Guest names: Melissa and Evan. Dates matching the girls' weekend. Deposit charged to the shared card. Paul looked at his phone and stopped leaning back. Someone at the far end of the table muttered, "Wait, Evan." Melissa said, "It's not what it looks like." I almost laughed at how many times that sentence has been used by people standing next to exactly what it looks like. Karen flipped to the bank tab. The hotel deposit was on the joint card. Melissa looked at me instead of her sister. "He's making it about money because that's how he controls everything." I said, "The money is part of it because you used shared funds for a trip you lied about." Paul cleared his throat. "I thought this was a girls' weekend." "It was supposed to be a weekend for me," Melissa said. "With Evan?" Karen asked. Melissa's voice sharpened. "Nothing happened." "That wasn't the question," I said. Karen kept reading. Her thumb paused on one of the printed screenshots. Her lips parted slightly. I knew which one she had reached. "He'll be mad, but he always calms down and pays the bills." Karen looked up. "Melissa." Melissa shook her head. "Those are private." Karen's voice was quieter now. "Are they fake?" "That's not the point." "It is the entire point," I said. Melissa pushed her chair back. "You went through my private messages. You saved screenshots in the shared folder on the shared laptop connected to the family email. But again, if any of it is fake, say that." Her mouth opened, then closed. Nobody rescued her from the silence. Karen turned another page. This one had the test message. "If he fights, he's controlling. If he lets me go, he never cared. Too stable to leave anyway." Karen looked like she had swallowed something bitter. "You told me he was punishing you for needing space," she said. Melissa's eyes filled for real this time. "I didn't need space. You told Evan it was a test." I was confused. "You were specific," I said. She snapped her eyes to me. "You think you're so perfect because you stayed calm?" "No," I said. "I stayed calm because every time I reacted like a human being, you tried to turn it into evidence against me." A friend near the kitchen looked down at her phone. "There are counseling cancellations in here." "Yes," I said. 3 appointments. I didn't include that because I think counseling would magically fix everything. I included it because Melissa told several of you I refused to work on the marriage." Karen's shoulders dropped. Paul rubbed the back of his neck. "I didn't know any of this." "No," I said. "You didn't ask." That landed harder than I intended. He looked embarrassed, and part of me felt bad, but not enough to take it back. Melissa started crying then. Not loud at first, just enough for the room to remember she was the one crying. "You destroyed me," she said. I looked around the table. The same room that had been ready to judge me suddenly had questions for her. "Why was Evan's name on the room?" someone asked. "Why use the joint card?" another said. "Did you tell people it was a girls' weekend?" Melissa put both hands over her face. "I can't believe you're all doing this." Karen, who had defended her for days, said, "No, Melissa, you brought us into this." That was when Melissa's phone buzzed loudly against the table. She looked down. Her face crumpled into anger, not sadness. I didn't need to see the screen. A second later, she made sure I knew anyway. "Evan says he needs distance because of you," she said. A laugh came from somewhere near the counter, quickly swallowed. I didn't laugh. "Because of me? You dragged his name into this." "His name was on the reservation. He says he didn't sign up to be part of a divorce fight." I nodded once. "Sounds like Evan understands consequences when they reach him." Her face twisted. "You're enjoying this." "No," I said. "I'm done absorbing it." Karen closed the folder and pushed it back toward me, but gently this time. "What happens now?" she asked. I had thought about that question for days. I knew exactly what I was willing to say and what I wasn't. I wasn't going to perform my pain for people who had come prepared to judge me. I wasn't going to negotiate my marriage over paper plates and casserole dishes. "What happens now is simple," I said. I will not pay for anything connected to Evan. Joint money stays for necessary shared obligations only. Mortgage, utilities, groceries, insurance. Nothing else gets blurred into household expenses. Melissa wiped her face. So you're controlling me. No, I said. You wanted freedom. I'm giving you exactly that, without my wallet attached. Her eyes went hard. I continued anyway. If you want to repair this marriage, it starts with ending whatever this is with Evan, going back to counseling, and telling the truth to every person you dragged into a false version of this. Not a speech about feeling trapped. The truth. If you don't want that. Then we move towards separation and divorce calmly, through the proper channels. The word divorce changed the room. It shouldn't have. The marriage had been bleeding for a long time. But people react differently when the word finally arrives wearing shoes and carrying documents. Melissa stood. A real husband wouldn't give up this easily. I looked at her, and for a moment I saw the woman I had married. Not because she was acting like that woman, but because I could still remember her so clearly. I saw her laughing in the kitchen, pulling me into a dance, making me believe steady and exciting could belong in the same room. Then I saw the screenshots again. Too stable to leave anyway. I said, a real wife wouldn't turn loyalty into a leash. She flinched like I had shouted. I hadn't. That was the last thing I said at that dinner about our marriage. The group chat exploded for a while afterward, but I did not debate. A few people apologized privately. Paul sent, I should have asked before I judged. I replied yes. That was all. Karen called me the next morning. I was in the kitchen, making coffee for one. It felt strange. Not victorious. Not sad exactly. Just quiet in a way that belonged to me. Karen sounded tired. I'm sorry, she said. I know. She told me pieces. I filled in the rest because she's my sister. I understand why you wanted to believe her. That doesn't make it okay. No, I said. It doesn't. She was quiet for a moment. She's saying you planned to embarrass her. She planned to accuse me in front of everyone. I know. I didn't invite the audience, Karen. I just stopped being the only person in the room without a defense. Karen exhaled. She won't admit that yet. Then she won't. Melissa came home later that day. She moved through the house like every room had insulted her. She didn't mention Evan at first. She didn't mention the trip either. The overnight bag was still on the couch, half-packed, looking less like a symbol of freedom and more like evidence nobody wanted to touch. That evening, she stood in the doorway of the kitchen while I reviewed a message from the attorney. So that's it, she asked. I closed the laptop halfway. That depends on you. No, it depends on you. You're the one choosing divorce. I'm choosing not to stay married under these terms. She crossed her arms. Because I made one mistake. I looked at her for a long moment. A mistake is forgetting to lock the back door. This was a reservation, a calendar lie, joint charges, a story you fed to our family, and messages where you called me too stable to leave. Her eyes shone. I was venting. You were planning. She looked toward the living room, then back at me. You don't know what it felt like to be me in this marriage. You're right, I said. I don't. But I know what it felt like to be me. And I'm done being punished for not falling apart loudly enough to satisfy you. She shook her head. You're so cold. No. I'm careful now. That made her cry again. Maybe it was real. Maybe it was not. I had spent years trying to separate her pain from her performance, and I was tired. Over the next week, I kept everything factual. When she sent long texts about betrayal and emotional safety, I replied only to logistics. When she accused me of abandoning her, I reminded her of the counseling condition. When she said I had humiliated her, I wrote, I will discuss this with a counselor or mediator. I will not debate it in the group chat. Evan disappeared faster than I expected. Melissa didn't volunteer that, of course, but I heard enough through the same messy human network she had tried to use against me. He told her he cared about her, but needed to step back. He said he didn't want to be named in a divorce. He said the timing was unhealthy. He said a lot of things that meant the same thing. He liked being chosen, not being responsible. Melissa tried to blame me for that too. You scared him off, she said one night. I was putting a mug in the cabinet. The hinge squeaked, the same one I had been meaning to fix. No, I said. I made the situation honest. He reacted to honesty. She stared at me like she wanted to argue, but there was nowhere for the argument to go. The separation did not happen overnight. Real life doesn't move like that. There were documents, appointments, awkward conversations about accounts, and long evenings where the house felt too familiar to be peaceful. We discussed what had to be paid and what had to be separated. I kept records. I stayed polite. I stopped explaining my tone to someone who had used my tone as a weapon no matter what it was. The hardest part was not losing Melissa as she was at the end. The hardest part was grieving the Melissa I kept expecting to come back if I just loved her correctly. There were still moments when memory ambushed me. A song while I was driving. Her favorite mug in the cabinet. The old photo stuck behind a stack of appliance manuals in a drawer. In the photo, we were both younger, both laughing, neither of us aware that one day we would become people who needed folders and screenshots to tell the truth. But every time guilt crept in, I remembered the test. If he fights, he's controlling. If he lets me go, he never cared. Too stable to leave anyway. That was not confusion. That was a trap. And I had finally stepped out of it. A month after the dinner, Melissa asked if I would consider pausing the separation. Not stopping it. Pausing it. She said she needed time to process. She said everyone was judging her. She said Karen barely talked to her. She said Evan had complicated things by disappearing when she needed support. We were standing in the kitchen again because somehow all important things in our marriage happened between the sink and the coffee maker. What about counseling? I asked. She looked exhausted. I don't want to sit in a room and be attacked. What about telling everyone the truth? I don't think public humiliation helps healing. You were comfortable with public accusation. Her mouth tightened. So you're going to punish me forever? No, I said. I'm going to stop volunteering for the role. She stared at me, and for once, she had no phrase ready. No control. No space. No emotional safety. No breathing. Just silence. I wanted that silence to feel like victory. It didn't. It felt like the final proof that the marriage I had been trying to save was not the marriage in front of me. The next morning, I made coffee for one again. I fixed the cabinet hinge before the cup was cool enough to drink. It took 8 minutes. I had put it off for months, partly because small repairs are easy to ignore when your whole life feels like one big repair you can't finish. When the hinge stopped squeaking, the kitchen sounded different. Not happy, not empty, just quiet. My attorney sent a follow-up email that afternoon. I read it twice, then saved it in a new folder. Not the old printed one with tabs for hotel, bank, texts, counseling, timeline. That folder had done its job. This new one was simpler. Separation. Melissa wanted me to fight for her. For years, I thought that meant absorbing the insults, funding the stability, staying calm through disrespect, and proving my love by never reaching my limit. At the end, I did fight. I fought the lie. I fought the version of me she sold to people who never asked for proof. I fought the habit of confusing patience with weakness. And most of all, I fought for the man I was before I let her make me feel small. If you like the stories, don't forget to leave a comment and support the channel by subscribing. See you in the upcoming stories.